I'm Jeff Cornwall, host of The Entrepreneurial Mind.
And I'm Chris Sloan, co-chair of the Emerging Companies team at Baker Donaldson.
Talkopolis, the social media TV network for your city.
Chris, good to be back with you again.
Good to be here.
One of the things that comes up quite often with entrepreneurs I work with is this whole issue around non-disclosure agreements. Whether to have them, whether to sign them, how important it is, what if somebody says no, kind of what's your rule of thumb and what's your thought on NDAs and their role and how important they are?
Yeah, so I think it's a very good question, and it comes up a lot. And I think you have to break the discussion into sort of two buckets. One is dealing with investors, and one is anyone else that you're dealing with.
Right.
Investors are sort of a special case because traditionally, and I'm really speaking more of venture capital or true professional investors, they generally either won't or are very reluctant to sign non-disclosure agreements. Largely because they see hundreds of business plans every year and they just see them as an open invitation to be sued.
Right.
So most investors won't, and they take the position that we're reputable, and if we had a reputation for having loose lips, nobody would send us stuff. So a lot of times it's not even worth asking an investor, and the way you sort of moderate that risk is you just control what you disclose to them. So that's the investor side of the equation. When you're dealing with any other party in your business, whether it's a third party that you're discussing a contract or some strategic transaction with, or you're discussing someone joining as an advisor or an employee, the way to think about the question is simply this. Are you disclosing or likely to disclose, or are they going to have access to some information that would harm the company if it became public? That's really what it boils down to.
So can you give some examples of things that, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs I talk with assume everything needs to be protected and kept quiet and kept under a bushel basket somehow.
Let's talk about that, because I think that's a fair question. And I am of the opinion that I think you probably share, that entrepreneurs do tend to overemphasize what they have that's proprietary, sometimes to their detriment.
Right.
You can go crazy with non-disclosure agreements, and you don't always have to have one. And there are some cases where you probably shouldn't have one. In fact, I heard a venture capital investor one time say that he actually had heard of the concept of a company requiring people to sign a reverse non-disclosure agreement where you were obligated to tell other people about this idea. His notion being that, look, if it really was that secret or that special, someone else would be doing it, and or no one's going to believe that you can pull it off anyway.
Right.
So there is a notion of, really having some self-awareness or getting some advice from a good attorney, for example, about what really is proprietary and that you should protect.
So some examples might be.
So could be things that are proprietary formulas or algorithms, anything that functions either in software or just in a business process in what I would call a black box, where
Gotcha.
Something comes in and something comes out, and it's not going to be apparent how that transformation happens or how the output is produced. Those are the kinds of things that generally will qualify as trade secrets, and certainly anything that's a trade secret is something you'd want to protect. Sometimes people are sensitive about things like customer lists, prospect lists, those kinds of things as well. But
the fact that you've got a really interesting, non-protectable business concept, you're probably just kind of whistling in the wind, aren't you?
Yeah, and I when I run into that with clients, I tell them two things. I mean, first of all, you need to take a hard look at the intellectual property position and whether you have any or can develop any, and if you can, what should you do so that you create those barriers to entry, because those certainly make your company more stronger and more appealing to investors. But then the second piece is, if you really don't, then let's not act like you do. You can't put lipstick on the pig and make it something other than a pig.
Right.
And So you can ask a party for a non-disclosure agreement if you think you have something. If they say no and you still want to proceed with the discussion, then going back to my comment about investors, what you just have to do is not disclose anything that you are concerned about them having. And if that comes up in the course of the discussion, you just say, hey, I'd love to get into that with you, but if you really want to get into that, we do need to sign a non-disclosure agreement. The catch-22 that people try to get themselves into is they want to cold call or go through an intro to talk to a potential business partner, and they say, hey, I've got something really awesome I want to talk to you about, but I can't tell you what it is till you sign that
Right.
non-disclosure agreement.
Right.
If you think about it from their standpoint, it sounds crazy, and they're
Right.
like, no, hell no, right? And so you have to, don't use non-disclosure agreements to the point that it's costing you business opportunities.
Or driving away potential
driving away potential-
help. I mean,
yeah.
one of the things I've had is I've had alums reach out to me after they graduate and say, hey, I got this great business idea. I want to come and get your advice, but I need you to sign this NDA first. And I'll say no.
Yeah.
I mean, all I have in this town is my reputation, and for the same reason you're talking about the investors, all I'm worried about is a lawsuit at that point.
Well, and I get asked occasionally.
I'm too old to start another venture at this point. I'm not going to steal their idea.
I get asked sometimes, and I tell them I have ethical obligations that are probably far stronger than anything you could draft into a non-disclosure agreement. So that's sort of some thoughts on how you can use or misuse non-disclosure agreements. I think we talk in another episode about some of the mistakes people make within non-disclosure agreements that they're actually using.
Well, let's do that. Let's circle back sometime and talk about how you might structure an NDA.
Sounds good.
All right. Any place we can send people if they want more information on this?
They're always happy to reach out to me or any of my colleagues. We certainly deal with non-disclosure agreements with startups regularly, and happy to give you our thoughts.
Thank you very much.